Hello! His syndicate is incredibly wealthy, disciplined, and sophisticated. It is believed that he made billions of dollars each year by flooding entire countries with his products. This allowed him to live a lavish life full of wealth and luxury. He made so much money that he once lost $66 million in one night at a casino and wasn't even bothered by it. Some media outlets have claimed that he was an even bigger player than El Chapo and Pablo Escobar. If that's true, then why was he alone at an airport in the Netherlands? This is the story of Tse Chi-lop. Tse was born in 1963 in Guangzhou, China. Later, he moved from Guangzhou to Hong Kong, where he became part of a triad gang called the Big Circle Boys, an organization formed by former members of the Red Guards, a paramilitary group established by Mao Zedong. The name Big Circle Boys is said to have originated from a circle drawn on a map indicating their operating area in China. This gang quickly spread across Canadian cities, and in 1988, Tse, then 25 years old, followed suit and moved to Canada. He began living in Toronto, where he and the gang focused on importing large shipments of heroin into the USA. In October 1997, Tse's life took a dramatic turn. Despite always operating under the radar, but their business grew so rapidly that it caught the attention of USA law enforcement. Tse and his gang were held responsible for the influx of heroin into the country. Authorities in Hong Kong arrested Tse at the request of the USA and immediately extradited him. Tse was charged with large-scale drug smuggling in the USA, and all signs pointed towards a life sentence. However, in a surprising turn of events, he was sentenced to just 9 years in prison. In court, Tse stated that he had learned his lesson and deeply regretted his actions. He shared his future plans of wanting to open a restaurant and live a law-abiding life. He also mentioned that he needed to care for his elderly parents and a sick child, arguing that he couldn't afford a life sentence and pleaded for leniency. Whether he was truthful or not, but this certainly helped in his sentencing. 9 years for major drug smuggling in the USA is almost unheard of. Whether he genuinely regretted his actions is highly questionable. After serving his 9-year sentence, Tse was released in 2006 from the federal prison in Elkton, Ohio, and returned to Canada. After completing his prison sentence, he had to undergo an additional 4 years of supervised probation with regular check-ins and other mandatory rules. Tse followed all the rules and appeared to be on the right track again. 1 year after finishing his probation, Tse registered a new company in Hong Kong under his wife's name in 2011. The company was called China Peace Investment Group Company Limited. China Peace Investment Group was supposed to be a group of investors who would invest in real estate, financial markets, and other sectors, mainly in Hong Kong. However, the USA Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, discovered something entirely different. The company was nothing more than a front. They found that Tse was involved in smuggling again. Interestingly, he wasn't just as strong as he was in 1997. Before his 9-year sentence for drug trafficking, he had grown far more powerful than before. Tse became the head of his own criminal organization and succeeded in forming alliances with various Chinese gangs, such as 14K, Woxing Wo, and Sun Yian. All these gangs worked for Tse, and his organization stood above them all. It was said that he even reconciled feuds between rival gangs, convincing them that cooperating was more profitable than continuing to be enemies. Tse's organization became known as Sam Gore, the Syndicate, or simply, the Company. Tse understood that operating in absolute silence was best. Conflicts would lead to unwanted attention, and attention was bad for business. He made them realize that the market was big enough for everyone to make plenty of money, and he wasn't wrong. Tse's organization sold large quantities of heroin and ketamine, but his main revenue always came from the highly addictive drug, methamphetamine. His preferred smuggling method was to hide the drugs in tea packages, and part of Tse's success came from his professional business model. Tse's production line could be seen as a prime example of high-quality drug manufacturing on a large scale. Hidden in the valleys of Shan State in Myanmar, the heart of Southeast Asia's Golden Triangle, his organization produced high-grade amphetamines in super labs, perfectly designed to ensure maximum efficiency, fast production, and the highest possible output. Another compelling aspect of his business model was the guarantee of free replacements without extra cost or deposit if any of his shipments were seized by police or customs, or if the shipment was stolen, as long as there was proof. This irresistible policy attracted many customers, but it also brought trouble as it drew the attention of law enforcement without his knowledge. TSE flooded the Australian market with his drugs. In 2011, Australian police arrested a group of Australians importing heroin and methamphetamine into the country. This was a small arrest, so the police decided not to detain them immediately. Instead, they put the group under surveillance, wiretapping their phones and tracking their every move in hopes of finding leads to those behind the operation. The group's shipments were frequently intercepted, leading them to repeatedly request replacement shipments from TSE's organization. Although the policy was still honored, TSE's organization began losing patience with the group, since many other shipments to Australia continued without issues. In 2013, the leader of the Australian group was summoned to Hong Kong to explain his actions. Australian police informed Hong Kong police about the man, and they began monitoring him. Hong Kong police discovered that the man met with none other than Tse Chi Lop. This immediately put Tse on the radar of Hong Kong authorities. Why was he meeting with an Australian drug trafficker? They started monitoring Tse and noticed that he lived extravagantly, surrounded by wealth, always accompanied by a personal security team of at least 8 professional Muay Thai fighters who were regularly rotated as part of his security protocol. It's important to note that at this point, Tse was still a complete mystery to them, and Hong Kong authorities had no idea about the vast scale of the organization he was running. TSE would often host lavish birthday parties each year at expensive resorts and 5-star hotels, flying his family and entourage by private jet. He once took his family and entourage to Thailand, staying at a luxurious resort for 4 months. Despite living in luxury, Tse was always working, frequently texting and making calls to give orders. If there was anything Tse loved more than luxury, it was gambling. You may have heard the term high roller, and Tse was the true definition of it. He regularly engaged in high-stakes gambling, betting not in thousands or tens of thousands, but in millions of dollars. An investigator once observed Tse losing $66 million in a single night at the tables in Macau. Losing $66 million in one night without flinching was a compelling reason to investigate further. Who was this man, and how did he become so wealthy? Investigators were determined to find out exactly who this mysterious super-rich man was. After extensive surveillance, the police suspected that Tse was a major drug trafficker who supplied methamphetamine, heroin, and ecstasy to the USA, Australia, and other countries, but they still hadn't realized the full scale of his organization. On the morning of November 15th, 2016, Kai Jung-zae was on his way back home to Taiwan. As he passed through the Myanmar airport, Kai appeared nervous, cautious, and kept scratching his hands due to blisters. His behavior aroused suspicion, leading airport police to stop and search him. They found 80 grams of ketamine taped to his thighs. Kai's hands were severely damaged from exposure to the drug, which is highly toxic, according to an official. Although the DEA had warned them about Kai, the airport police felt lucky to have caught him, as he had essentially exposed himself due to his anxiety. While Kai refused to talk, the police decided to check his phone. On it, they discovered a video of a man crying, bound and surrounded by 3 gang members who were doing unpleasant things to him. This man was said to have thrown 300 kilograms of methamphetamine into the sea, thinking a patrol boat was approaching. This video was sent to people like Kai as a reminder not to do anything stupid or betray the organization. Kai didn't have just one phone. He had another, which a police commander referred to as an Aladdin's Cave of Intelligence. It contained a large number of photos, videos, call logs, and thousands of messages related to drug trafficking. After piecing together various pieces of information, the police traced an address in Yangon, Myanmar, where a Chinese tea packing company was located. Remember how TSE's organization often hid drugs in tea packages? 2 days after Kai's arrest, Myanmar police decided to raid this address, hitting the jackpot. they found 622 kilograms of ketamine, 1,100 kilograms of crystal meth, and various other drugs. Kai was confronted with this information but still refused to speak while the police continued to thoroughly examine his phone. As they went through the photos, an investigator suddenly recognized a familiar face in one of the pictures. It was Tse-Chi Lop. In 2013, Kai's phone was subsequently shared with law enforcement agencies worldwide, where Tse might have smuggled his drugs. Police in Australia, China, Japan, and New Zealand all examined the contents of the phone. They were able to link large shipments to a single group, the group Kai was working with. Previously, they thought these shipments were carried out by multiple groups, but that wasn't the case. This was the work of Tse and his massive organization referred to as a Chinese anti-drug agency. Further investigation revealed that the organization's manufacturing hub had shifted from China to Shan State in Myanmar in recent years. While China provided the organization easy access to key ingredients, but it did not allow large-scale production without interference from law enforcement. In contrast, Myanmar offered the organization the freedom to operate without hassle from authorities, protected by rebel groups. TSE's organization had absolute freedom to produce there, with materials and workers transported to the facility in luxury SUVs. Everyone knew what was going on, but no one dared speak up as doing so could be extremely dangerous. No one wanted to cross TSE. The retail market for methamphetamine in the Asia-Pacific region is estimated to be worth between $30.3 billion and $61.4 billion annually. With relatively low production costs, minimal labor requirements, and high selling prices, the revenue generated is immense. According to estimates by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, TSC could produce 1 kilogram of meth in his superlabs in Myanmar at a cost of about $1,800 per kilogram. The average retail price per kilogram in Thailand is $70,000, $300,000 in Australia, and $588,000 in Japan. In Japan, this means profits could increase more than 300 times. If TC were to lose 10 tons of meth but managed to get just one shipment through, he would still earn a massive profit, which is why he could easily provide replacements for lost shipments. UNODC estimated that TSA's methamphetamine revenue in 2018 was $8 billion annually, but could be as high as $18 billion. His organization controlled 40% to 70% of the wholesale market, staggering figures to contemplate. Experts have compared TSE's organization to the Latin USA cartels, suggesting it is just as large, if not larger. Jeremy Douglas, the UNODC regional representative for Southeast Asia and the Pacific, stated, Tse-Chi Lop is on the same level as El Chapo, or perhaps even Pablo Escobar. The term kingpin is often used, and there is no doubt it fits perfectly in this case. Compared to Latin USA cartels, TSA's organization operates transnationally, is incredibly wealthy, disciplined, and highly sophisticated. As mentioned earlier, TC has done his job remarkably well. He demonstrated to others that there was a lot of money to be made. His organization served a larger and more dispersed drug market and collaborated with various local criminal groups, helping to limit uncontrolled violence. According to anti-narcotics officials, they operate like a seamless global corporation. Experts also compared TSA's personality to figures like El Chapo and Pablo Escobar. While El Chapo and Pablo were notorious and extremely violent, Tse was discreet and little known. What do you think? Is he bigger than El Chapo or Pablo Escobar? In February 2018, Tse faced some trouble when one of his super labs in Myanmar was raided by the police. More than 200,000 liters of chemicals were seized, along with 10,000 kilograms of caffeine and 73.5 kilograms of sodium hydroxide, all essential ingredients in the production process. That same year, several senior members of his organization were also arrested. Additionally, smaller labs used for testing new formulas were raided. The situation worsened as seizures of his shipments increased significantly, while the prices of the drugs he produced dropped. However, Tsay wouldn't be TC if he didn't find new ways to smuggle his drugs. He changed his transportation routes and even started using Laotian couriers to carry 30 kilograms of drugs in backpacks across the border for him. However, pressure from law enforcement continued to mount. The Australian authorities were aggressively hunting Tsay down and wanted to capture him as soon as possible. They were fed up with him flooding their country with drugs for years. Tsay knew he was being hunted and always moved cautiously, which made the news of one of the world's biggest drug lords being arrested at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, on January 22, 2021 even more surprising. So why was one of the world's biggest drug lords at Schiphol Airport as a regular passenger? He was on his way from Taiwan to Canada with a stopover in Amsterdam, but unfortunately for him, he never made it to Canada. TSE fought against being extradited to Australia, but was ultimately sent there in December 2022. When people read this news, many asked, why did he take a commercial flight with a stopover when he had the money and power to arrange a private jet, right? We might never know the answers to these questions. After being arrested once and easily acquitted, Tsay seemed ready to double down on his efforts to become a major player in the drug trade. He professionalized his business and made billions of dollars. Out of all the possible endings to Tsay's story, no one would have guessed it would end at an airport in the Netherlands as he was preparing for a layover on his way to Canada. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, the sky over New York was clear and vibrant, with not a cloud in sight. Everything was calm until two passenger planes unexpectedly shattered the tranquility by crashing into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. Both buildings collapsed within about 90 minutes of being attacked. Not stopping there, another hijacked plane crashed into the Pentagon, the headquarters of the United States Department of Defense in Washington, causing structural damage and collapse. This was the first attack on USA soil since Japan's surprise attack during World War II, leaving a deep scar on the USA government and its people. White House officials were at a loss not knowing who the perpetrators were, especially as the Taliban immediately declared they had no involvement. However, the government needed to provide an explanation to the public, and so, a month later, the USA president declared a war on terrorism with the goal of eliminating bin Laden. Bin Laden, the most infamous global terrorist and leader of Al-Qaeda, was the son of a wealthy family from Saudi Arabia and was considered one of the richest single men in the world. Born in 1957 into a wealthy construction family in Saudi Arabia, he was the 17th child out of 52 siblings. The large number of siblings was not so much due to his mother, but mainly because of his father's multiple marriages. Bin Laden's father, with his sharp business acumen and loyalty to the Saudi rulers, had close ties with the Saudi royal family. For example, King Faisal bin Abdulaziz even issued a royal decree assigning all future construction projects to the Bin Laden family's construction company. This allowed him to monopolize the construction of all mosques and other religious buildings in Saudi Arabia and several other Arab countries. By the 1960s, he had amassed a fortune of over $5 billion, so having more than 20 wives and fathering over 50 children was quite normal. Thanks to his father's efforts, bin Laden naturally became a wealthy young man. After graduating from university, he joined the family business and thrived in the oil and construction sectors, amassing personal wealth worth billions of dollars. This could have been the story of a wealthy young man striving to become a billionaire and proving himself, but bin Laden's life seemed to have much in common with other ruthless figures, as the comfortable life did not satisfy him. In 1979, the Soviet Union launched a war in Afghanistan, resulting in 1 million deaths and 6 million displaced persons. As a fervent believer in Islam, bin Laden strongly opposed the Soviet invasion and decided to join the fight, even willing to temporarily suspend his studies to participate. Bin Laden and his like-minded associates went to Afghanistan and joined the Islamic Jihadist organization to fight against the Soviet Red Army. He lived there for about 10 years until the Soviets withdrew in 1988. It was during this time in 1988 that bin Laden founded Al-Qaeda with the aim of repelling the Soviet invaders. Initially, Al-Qaeda had a good relationship with the USA and Western countries, even receiving a lot of weapons and military equipment because "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." However, the relationship between the two sides changed drastically after a while. In 1991, when the Gulf War erupted, which initially was a conflict between the USA and Iraq, Saudi Arabia, as a neighboring country, also grew concerned when the war began. Bin Laden approached the Saudi royal family and suggested, "Don't buy Dongfeng missiles from China anymore. I have the Al-Qaeda organization. Let me handle the defense of the country." However, the Saudi royal family was not lacking in intelligence. They feared that if they entrusted defense responsibilities to Al-Qaeda, Saudi Arabia might one day become an extremist military government. Therefore, they cleverly declined bin Laden's offer. An unexpected situation then occurred. After rejecting bin Laden, the Saudi royal family agreed to let the USA build a military base on their territory. This was unacceptable to bin Laden. He felt that he represented the righteous Muslims, and from the founding of Al-Qaeda, his goal had been to gather the strength of Arabs to resist imperialist invasions. He wondered why the royal family was colluding with the USA military and why foreigners should interfere in the affairs of Muslims. Clearly, according to bin Laden, the USA wanted to impose imperialism on the Islamic country, which was an affront to Islam. As a leading radical Muslim, he was determined to fight against the USA, which eventually led to the events of September 11th. Talking about the September 11th attacks, this act of terrorism was truly severe. Over 2,900 people were killed, and the economic damage was estimated to exceed $200 billion, equivalent to 2% of the USA GDP at that time. At that moment, USAs felt like people who had just broken up with their partners, completely losing their sense of security. Although many USAs owned guns, but this was a terrorist attack using airplanes to crash directly into buildings, an unimaginable situation that no one could defend against. The USA Department of Defense declared this the most serious attack on USA soil in over 200 years of national history, with the number of casualties surpassing the total casualties from the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor during World War II. Immediately after the incident, military forces across the USA were put on the highest alert. When the September 11th events occurred, President George W. Bush was reading a book to children at an elementary school in Florida. His bodyguards arrived and whispered in his ear. Upon hearing the news of the severe terrorist attack, Bush was genuinely confused, silent, and shocked. President Bush tried to remain calm and quickly left the school under the escort of agents to avoid the possibility of another terrorist attack. Immediately after receiving the news of the terrorist attack, President Bush boarded Air Force One and moved between several military bases, eventually landing at Offutt Air Force Base. In a video conference with the CIA director, he was informed that the mastermind behind the attack was almost certainly bin Laden. This was the reason Bush initiated the war in Afghanistan as mentioned earlier, with a firm determination to find bin Laden at any cost, dead or alive. Meanwhile, bin Laden was enjoying a luxurious life as a guest of the Taliban. At that time, the Taliban controlled almost all of Afghanistan following the Civil War, and the situation remained unchanged to this day. When bin Laden founded Al-Qaeda a few years earlier, he had become acquainted with Mohammed Omar, the leader of the Taliban, leading to a close relationship. One of Omar's wives was bin Laden's daughter, meaning bin Laden had become Omar's father-in-law. When Bush learned that bin Laden was hiding with the Taliban, he threatened Omar, demanding that he hand over bin Laden or face consequences. However, Omar was not easily intimidated, and of course could not hand over his father-in-law, especially when the father-in-law was carrying a large sum of money. This was indeed a difficult situation, wanting to retain both the person and the money. Realizing that bin Laden would not surrender voluntarily, President Bush declared to the world, "We will not distinguish between terrorists and those who harbor them. They will all be held accountable." Thus, the USA officially deployed troops to Afghanistan under the pretext of fighting terrorism, determined to find bin Laden. However, what the USA did not anticipate was that the search would extend for 10 years. Before the war in Afghanistan began, 7 CIA agents flew to a valley in northeastern Afghanistan to officially cooperate with the Northern Alliance, another armed group in Afghanistan. The Northern Alliance, which had been worried about its inability to defeat the Taliban, saw this as a good opportunity and agreed to cooperate. On October 7, 2001, the USA military, along with the United Kingdom and other forces, including the Northern Alliance troops on the ground, launched attacks on multiple Taliban positions. Just 1 month later, the Taliban was nearly shattered by the power of USA planes, tanks, and artillery. Armed only with AK-47s and bayonets, the Taliban could not withstand the assault. Despite this, bin Laden continued to live well. To taunt the USA, he even sent a videotape to Al Jazeera in which he told USA that he was living comfortably, eating well, and in good health. He even challenged President Bush, warning that more terrorist attacks would follow. Upon viewing the tape, President Bush felt extremely worried and uneasy. To vent his anger, Bush called in the Secretary of Defense and the CIA director and gave them a severe reprimanding. He finally shouted, "Where are your cannons? Bring them out here for me!" Following this, the USA military launched a fierce bombing campaign in Afghanistan. Every day, there was a scheduled bombing and ground troops continuously searched for targets. Although the campaign did not capture bin Laden, it was not entirely futile, as the third highest ranking member of Al-Qaeda was killed. Realizing that the USA military was aggressively hunting for him, bin Laden and his followers fled. So, where did bin Laden go? In reality, he had taken refuge in the mountainous region along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, specifically in a mountainous area known as Tora Bora. This was an ideal hiding place with its winding, complex terrain and numerous caves, making it perfect for guerrilla warfare. Moreover, bin Laden was familiar with the area, having fought against Soviet forces there previously. The USA paid no heed to the terrain advantages that bin Laden relied on, believing that such advantages were insignificant compared to their overwhelming military power. Therefore, USA planes conducted relentless bombing of the area, confident that bin Laden could not escape the mountains. With a better safe than sorry mentality, the USA military spared no expense in bombing suspected caves where bin Laden might be hiding. In addition to conventional weapons, the USA military deployed laser-guided GBU-28 bombs and Paveway 3 missiles, which could penetrate up to 6 meters of concrete or 30 meters of earth before detonating. They also used Tomahawk cruise missiles, known for their high accuracy with an error margin of no more than 10 meters within a 2,000-meter range. The USA military continued these bombings for a month, and under such relentless assault, bin Laden could not endure indefinitely. On December 11th, the USA military learned via radio communication that bin Laden had escaped once again. A week later, bin Laden sent another videotape to Al Jazeera in which he sent warm greetings to those concerned about High, including President Bush and his family. From then on, bin Laden ceased using any communication devices, with all contact with the outside world being through letters. The USA capture operation stalled and no one knew where bin Laden had gone. The USA military had bombs in hand, but did not know where to deploy them. They considered offering a massive reward of $25 million for information leading to his capture, sending spies to infiltrate Al-Qaeda, or monitoring all of Afghanistan, but none of these plans advanced. Occasionally, bin Laden released a few videos to prove he was still alive. He seemed to have vanished from the earth. In 2002, there was a slight shift in the situation. At the Guantanamo Bay prison in Cuba, CIA agents were interrogating an Afghan terrorist. Unable to withstand the torture, the terrorist finally revealed an important piece of information. Bin Laden's alias was Abu Ahmed al-Kuwaiti. Of course, the CIA could not be sure whether this information was true or fabricated. With the attitude of, better to catch the wrong person than to miss the right one, the CIA immediately began investigating. But there were hundreds of people with the name Kuwaiti. It wasn't until 2009 that the CIA identified a person named Kuwaiti living in Abbottabad, northern Pakistan. By this time, President Bush had retired, and it had been 8 years since the September 11th attacks. Although the CIA was not certain if this Kuwaiti was connected to bin Laden, they sent several agents to Abbottabad. After a few weeks of investigation, they discovered that Kuwaiti lived in a large villa in a wealthy area of Abbottabad. This villa was the largest building in the area with 3 floors. Strangely, the villa had no telephone or internet connections, and living with Kuwaiti was a man named Abu Faraj al-Libi. The 2 men lived very discreetly, rarely going outside, which raised suspicions among the CIA agents. A few weeks later, the agents planned to install cameras on the trees around the house for 24/7 surveillance without being detected. However, just before the installation, Kuwaiti had all the trees around the house cut down. This made the CIA agents both embarrassed and concerned, as if the cameras had been installed, they might have been detected. As a result, the CIA continued to monitor the house with agents on the ground. A few weeks later, a surveillance report was sent to the CIA director. The report indicated that Kuwaiti's family never left household waste, burning all their trash in the yard. Additionally, the walls surrounding the villa were higher than usual, and there was barbed wire fencing. The largest room on the top floor had no windows, and there were many children in the yard, none of whom attended school, which was highly unusual for a high-end neighborhood in Pakistan. The final lines of the report astonished the CIA director. It stated that based on the amount of clothing hung out to dry, it seemed there was a 3rd family living in the villa, and the head of this family was very likely bin Laden. Immediately after, the CIA director rushed to the White House to report to President Obama. Although it was not certain whether bin Laden was actually in the house with the mindset of better safe than sorry, President Obama decided to carry out a major operation to eliminate bin Laden. If successful, this would bring great prestige. If not, there would be no significant loss and the search could continue. Regardless of the outcome, it was an opportunity not to be missed. At 2 p.m. on May 1st, 2011, Obama, along with senior military and government leaders, gathered in the White House Situation Room, their eyes fixed on the large screen in front of them. The actual attack was assigned to the SEAL team to ensure secrecy and prevent information leaks. In this operation, the USA did not coordinate with the local Pakistani authorities. The entire operation was commanded by the CIA. At 11 p.m. local time, 24 SEAL team members, divided into 2 groups, boarded 2 Black Hawk helicopters and departed from the USA military base in Afghanistan, flying 300 kilometers to Pakistan. As the first helicopter neared the villa, its tail accidentally hit the fence. However, this did not affect the morale of the team members, as they and the USA people had waited for this day for so long. 20 members from the helicopter made an emergency landing, donned night vision goggles, and stormed the villa. 4 men guarded the front door to prevent bin Laden from escaping. On the first floor of the villa, they shot anyone they encountered. After killing everyone on the first floor, they quickly moved up to the second floor and shot a young man, who was later identified as bin Laden's 23-year-old son. Eventually, they found bin Laden hiding in a room. The SEAL team did not speak, but immediately fired 2 shots from an M4 rifle. One of bin Laden's wives attempted to shield him from the bullets, but the 5.56 mm rounds penetrated her body and killed bin Laden. His body was then airlifted out of Pakistan. When Al-Qaeda forces arrived to assist, the USA team had long since departed, and the damaged helicopter was also destroyed on site. After confirming that the deceased was indeed bin Laden through DNA comparison, the USA decided to bury his body according to Islamic law and customs. Bin Laden's body was washed, wrapped in a white cloth, and prayed over with the help of an Arabic translator. However, to prevent his grave from becoming a shrine for his followers, the USA military decided to perform a sea burial. This thorn in the side of the USA, along with his brutality, bloodshed, and hatred, was finally consigned to the depths of the ocean forever. To some extent, bin Laden was a leader of an ambitious organization. For a long time, he was a warrior who renounced power and wealth to engage in the struggle against imperialist invasion. He once said, "My career needs money, but I do not." However, extremism and religious fanaticism turned his actions from a protective purpose into aggression and terrorism. After bin Laden's death, Al-Qaeda became a purely extremist religious terrorist organization, occupying cities in Yemen and establishing a branch in India. They claimed to be saving Muslims in the region from injustice and oppression, but valued other people's lives as worthless. If bin Laden were alive today, it's uncertain whether he would view this as the realization of his ideals or just a cruel joke. Drug traffickers are among the most despicable individuals in the world. They build their lavish lives on the suffering of others, even on the breakdown of other families. Yet their lives are often marked by strange colors and contain many thrilling experiences that are both shocking and thought-provoking. The main character in this story is an extreme example of such a legendary villain. He was once the biggest drug lord in Panama, an ally in life and death with notorious Colombian drug lords such as Blanco, Escobar, and the Ochoa brothers. He was also the commander-in-chief of the National Guard and the director of Panama's intelligence and anti-drug agency, the supreme spiritual leader of the nation. A military dictator who ruled over a territory until he was overthrown by the USA military commanded by George Bush. He was a top foreign agent trained by the CIA and collaborated for many years, receiving direct orders from former CIA Director George Bush. At the same time, he was a close friend of Fidel Castro, USA sworn enemy, and sold many important pieces of information to USA intelligence agencies. When he was obedient to the USA government turned a blind eye to all his crimes, such as drug trafficking, kidnapping, and murder. However, when he began to push the USA out of the Panama Canal for national interests, George Bush did not hesitate to resort to internal cleansing, perhaps even to silence him as he knew too many truths. His existence had become too dangerous for some in the USA government. If his life were made into a film, it would be an intense spy action movie, combining courage and cowardice, betrayal and loyalty and grudges and hatred. It would be a film about drug smuggling, political assassination, terrorism, and thrilling warfare. He is the only drug lord in the world who has ever been a head of state, the most powerful source of information in the history of human intelligence, a mastermind in political maneuvering, and a man who exposed the false face of USA, a cunning villain named Manuel Noriega. Noriega was an intelligence genius, evident from the day he was born, as even the CIA did not know his exact birth year. Born into a poor family, his parents died when he was just 5 years old, leaving him an orphan raised by his grandmother. From a young age, Noriega set out on a path of knowledge to change his fate. He worked hard to gain admission to the best high school in Panama, the National Institute. There he joined a socialist youth group and wrote many critiques of USA colonization of Panama. Upon graduating, he wrote a life plan on the school boat with dreams of becoming a psychologist, becoming the president of Panama, and driving the USA out of the Panama Canal area. Why did Noriega harbor such a deep hatred for USAs from a young age? This hatred stemmed from the fact that the USA monopolized the Panama Canal and manipulated the Panama province after it separated from Colombia. During the exploration period, Magellan proposed to the Spanish king to build a canal in the narrow isthmus of Panama to connect the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. This idea aimed to facilitate the quick transportation of plundered assets from the Pacific coast to Spain. However, Spain, weakened and unable to carry out the project, saw the USA seize the opportunity after Panama broke away from Spanish colonial rule and became a province of Colombia. Colombia was the first country to start the canal project, but after nearly 30 years, they had only dug 1/3 of it, and the company undertaking the project went bankrupt. The USA immediately jumped in and declared their intention to take over. However, Colombia disagreed, and the USA, angered, incited tensions between the Panama province and Colombia, encouraging the Panamanian people to pursue democracy and freedom. In November 1903, the USA pushed Panama to declare independence. Colombia sent troops to suppress the rebellion, but was defeated by the USA military and forced to cede the territory. After Panama's independence, the USA and Panama signed the Habonao-Varia Treaty, granting USA perpetual and exclusive ownership of the Panama Canal area. In return, Panama received $10 million and an additional $250,000 annually starting 9 years later. Panama ceded a 10-mile wide strip of land to serve as the Canal Zone, which the USA took over permanently and exercised sovereignty over. Thus, Panama became a dependent state of the USA, and USA capitalists built the Panama Canal at the cost of countless local workers' lives, including masons and laborers. The canal essentially became an overseas territory of the USA, fueling Noriega's determination, from a young age, to drive out the USA. However, Noriega was not a revolutionary with steadfast beliefs. His ambitions were clearly priced. From a young age, he became a speculator solely focused on money. During high school, while Noriega participated in progressive student movements, he also received money from the CIA. The USA turned him into a spy, providing information about student movements. In 1955, at around 20 years old, Noriega received his first intelligence payment from the USA amounting to $10,700. Noriega had a half-brother working at the Panamanian embassy in Peru. With his brother's help after graduating from high school, Noriega went to Lima, Peru to study at the Carrillo's Military Academy. After graduating from military school, Noriega returned home and joined the Panamanian National Guard, becoming an aide to Omar Torrijos, a military strongman of Panama. Noriega became Torrijos' loyal enforcer, carrying out many dirty tasks such as beating, arresting, and harassing members of opposition parties. Torrijos greatly appreciated Noriega's ruthless and decisive behavior. Torrijos sent Noriega to the USA School, run by the USA military in the Canal Zone, to enhance his knowledge in intelligence and psychology. This school trained pro-USA figures in the region. During his studies, Noriega established a closer working relationship with Washington through the school's leadership. He continuously provided intelligence about labor movements in Central USA countries to the USA. Noriega's achievements were highly valued by his USA bosses, and then-President Lyndon Johnson remarked that, at 30, Noriega was a valuable asset to the USA and a rising star in the Panamanian military. In 1968, Torrijos launched a military coup and took supreme power in Panama. Almost a year later, before Torrijos could stabilize his power, a group of reserve soldiers initiated a military coup. Noriega safely protected Torrijos and quelled the coup. In recognition of his efforts, Torrijos promoted him to the position of Deputy General of Panama, responsible for intelligence, surveillance, and anti-drug operations. With Noriega's intelligence support, and as an intermediary, Torrijos and President Jimmy Carter signed a treaty in which the USA agreed to return sovereignty of the Canal Zone to Panama in 1999. By the 1970s, during the peak of the Cold War, the USA increasingly relied on the intelligence Noriega provided about revolutionary Central USA countries like Cuba, Nicaragua, and El Salvador. Consequently, his relationship with USA intelligence agencies grew closer. In 1971, the CIA officially listed Noriega as an employee with a high salary of $200,000 per year, along with a $100,000 annual emergency fund that he managed. After 1976, Noriega began reporting directly to George Bush, who was then the CIA director. Once Bush finished his tenure as head of the liaison office in Beijing, George Bush quickly discovered that Noriega had many tricks up his sleeve and was even making deals with hostile countries. Indeed, Noriega was a master of manipulation, not shying away from any means to make money. While he earned from providing intelligence about Cuba to the USA, he also sold thousands of Panamanian passports to Fidel Castro for $5,000 each to support Cuba and the Soviet Union. What troubled George Bush the most was that Noriega was also aiding Colombian drug lords in trafficking drugs into the USA. During the 1970s and 1980s, Colombian drug lords were rising rapidly, with the Medellin cartel, led by Escobar, Blanco, and the Ochoa brothers, being the most prominent. Due to ongoing civil wars in Central USA countries such as Colombia, El Salvador, and Guatemala, Medellin cartel leaders needed a new drug transit point. Panama, with its favorable and peaceful location, became a prime target. At that time, Noriega, the head of Panama's anti-drug agency, was solely motivated by money, and the two sides quickly collaborated. The drug lords received Panama customs stamps and hiding places from Noriega. Once, when the Ochoa brothers' sister was kidnapped while transporting goods through Panama, Noriega used his influence to rescue her. A daughter of Escobar, born in Panama, was also given a Panamanian residence by Noriega. According to Escobar's son, Noriega received $5 million from his father to help build a drug empire in Panama. However, Torrijos did not support Noriega's drug trafficking and concealed evidence of Noriega's drug activities from George Bush, frequently criticizing him. Feeling betrayed, Noriega began to view Torrijos as an obstacle to his drug trade and ambitions. In 1981, Torrijos died in a plane crash while on foreign duty, and many suspected it was a scheme orchestrated by Noriega. After Torrijos' death, Noriega naturally became the new king of Panama and was no longer restrained by Torrijos. From then on, Noriega's collaboration with Colombian drug lords became more unrestricted. Panama quickly turned into a major drug transit hub and hotspot for drug lords. Noriega earned $300 million from protection money, bribes and interest through money laundering channels in Europe, even purchasing a large villa in France. George Bush was well aware that Noriega had opened a highway for drug trafficking from Colombia into the USA. He knew that removing Noriega would stop the main channel bringing drugs into the USA. However, he could not act directly because Noriega was very compliant. He only hinted that if Noriega stopped drug trafficking, he would increase the intelligence budget for him. Nevertheless, the cooperation between Noriega and Colombian drug lords, like Escobar, was not smooth. Once Escobar sent $1.4 million worth of drugs through Panama into the USA, and Noriega collected $1 million in fees. This strained the relationship between Noriega and Escobar, leading Noriega to turn against him and start an anti-drug campaign in Panama, shutting down many of Escobar's operations. As a result, their relationship completely collapsed. Former USA Secretary of State under Reagan, George Shultz, said that you can never completely buy Noriega, you can only hire him. However, the close relationship between Noriega and the USA did not last long. Between 1920 and 1982, the USA earned more than $45 billion from the Panama Canal, while Panama received only $1.1 billion. Noriega grew increasingly dissatisfied with the meager earnings from his drug trafficking and intelligence operations. Previously, Noriega might have kept silent, but after years of dictatorship, he began to openly disregard George Bush. For instance, he ruthlessly eliminated political rivals, oppressed the people, and declared election results invalid. More importantly, the world knew that Noriega was a product of USA training, and his behavior was completely contrary to what USA prided themselves on regarding democracy and freedom. A valuable asset had now become a burden on America's reputation and on George Bush personally. After George Bush became president in 1989, he secretly sent agents to accuse Noriega of drug trafficking and extortion in the USA. Upon learning that he was being indicted by the USA in their own country, Noriega felt humiliated and launched a large-scale anti-USA campaign. From February 1988 to May 1989, there were 600 incidents of tension involving USA military personnel and their families in Panama. Subsequently, George Bush invoked a clause in the Haibunau-Varilla Treaty that allowed the USA military to conduct unlimited military exercises in the Canal Zone. The USA troops stationed in Panama conducted a series of small exercises to warn Noriega, but Noriega was not intimidated. Firstly, since his youth, he had aspired to become a psychologist, and as an adult had written a textbook on psychological warfare, becoming an expert in the field of psychological operations. Secondly, after years of being the ruler of Panama, his ego had grown to an extraordinary level, and before being overthrown by the USA, Noriega had nearly reached the zenith of his power. During one of the USA military exercises, Noriega suddenly appeared with his entourage, walked straight to shake hands with the USA soldiers, and said into the camera, "Here I am, arrest me." On December 15, 1989, Noriega proactively declared war on the USA. He stepped onto the podium brandishing a large knife and shouting, "We will sit on both sides of the canal and watch the enemy's corpses float out to sea." The next day, Panama's National Defense Forces accidentally killed a USA Marine beat officer and threatened to rape his wife. George Bush could no longer tolerate the situation, as the Panama Canal contributed 10% of America's total trade volume and could not be allowed to be lost. On December 20th, 1989 at dawn in Panama City, 27,000 heavily armed USA troops launched an attack on the small nation. This was the largest military operation by the USA since the Vietnam War. The invasion had nothing to do with justice and bore a sarcastic name, Operation Just Cause. According to statistics, the USA invasion of Panama cost the lives of 23 USA soldiers and 3 USA civilians, while about 150 Panamanian soldiers and around 500 Panamanian civilians were killed. Noriega had long been the target of a manhunt by USA Delta Force. After the war broke out, Special Forces, Air Force units, and particularly Delta Force all came to confront him. Delta Force raided 42 locations that could be Noriega's hiding places, but did not find him. Eventually, a close bodyguard of Noriega revealed his hiding place at the Vatican Embassy. The USA military quickly surrounded the location to prevent reporters from eavesdropping inside the embassy with long microphones. The USA military used loudspeakers to create a sound barrier. On December 27th, the USA military's Psychological Operations Team 4 joined the campaign to persuade Noriega to surrender. This team consisted of young men in their early 20s. They changed the broadcast sound to heavy metal rock music and played it continuously 24 hours a day, as rock music could make people irritable and continuous play could prevent Noriega from getting any rest. The ironic thing is that Noriega later recalled that the room he was in was so soundproof that he could not hear the rock music at all. Instead, the 24-hour continuous heavy metal rock music drove the embassy staff nearly insane. At 9 p.m. on January 3, 1990, with no escape left, Noriega emerged from the Vatican Embassy, wearing his tattered 4-star general uniform, and officially surrendered to the USA military. His only request was to wear his general's uniform and to participate in the surrender ceremony as the head of state. However, Noriega was mistaken if he thought the USAs would organize such a ceremony. Delta Force and the USA Drug Enforcement Administration escorted him onto a C-130 cargo plane, ordered him to remove his uniform, and instead wear the gray prisoner uniform worn by USA detainees. They also gave him a new name, Prisoner No. 41586. The USA showed Noriega that in their eyes he was just an ordinary criminal. They were not there to fight, but merely to punish a traitor. Noriega was swiftly flown back to the USA and was immediately put on trial in Miami. The jury was instructed not to consider the political aspects of the case, meaning they did not need to worry about whether the USA had the right to invade Panama, arrest Noriega, or try him in the USA, and only needed to quickly convict him. In the end, Noriega was sentenced to 40 years in prison. In 2007, he was released early and then extradited to France for further imprisonment, where he served an additional year. He was eventually returned to Panama to continue serving his sentence and died in prison on May 29, 2017, due to illness. Noriega was undoubtedly guilty, but he was Panamanian and his crimes should have been judged by the people of Panama. Why did the USA military arrest him and bring him straight to the USA for trial? Even though Panama is a small country, but it has sovereignty that should not be violated. Despite the poverty of the Panamanian people, they should not be considered second-class citizens of the USA. The United Nations condemned the USA for violating international law, but global protests against the USA achieved little. The USA has Delta Force Special Forces and the most powerful military force in the world. If they truly want to defeat someone, they will do so. Plainly, this was a political trial, purely retribution, a killing the chicken to scare the monkey tactic, and an ambition to control global order. after Noriega's overthrow. Corruption and security issues continued to plague Panama. This central USA country of 3.9 million people once again became a haven for money laundering, tax evasion, and drug trafficking. In the book Black Flags, From Rome by an anonymous author, it is written that if extremist groups want to conquer Italy, their fighters would first need to ally with other forces to defeat the Mafia before they could take over the country. From the beginning, the Mafia has been a powerful force in Italy. The self-proclaimed Islamic State, IS, once announced plans to attack Western Europe and take control of Italy. However, the terrorist group also admitted that they were not yet ready to confront the notorious gangs and considered the Mafia to be the most formidable enemy of the jihadist fighters. You may have heard of the world's infamous criminal organizations like the Triads in China, the Yakuza in Japan, or the Mafia in Russia, Mexico, and other places. However, when it comes to the origins of the Mafia or organized crime in general, scholars often refer to the image of Italian criminals, one of the most terrifying, powerful, and ruthless organizations. Those who define the Mafia may not realize that this organization first formed in the 19th century on the island of Sicily, Italy. However, to truly understand the name and meaning of the Mafia, we need to look further back in history and analyze this phenomenon through the various phases of historical change. There is a theory that the word Mafia is an acronym for a patriotic organization called Morta alla Francia Italia Anella, which means death to the French, Italy cries. In the Sicilian language spoken on the beautiful island of Sicily in Italy, the term mafia is also used to refer to heroic and courageous acts, symbolizing the fearless resistance of Sicilian warriors against Greek invasions. Some other documents suggest that mafia originated from the Arabic word mahiyas, meaning a man worthy of respect. However, regardless of the origins of the mafia, previous studies have shown that it first appeared in southern Italy as a self-defense organization for the poor against the unjust oppression of the French occupiers. Historians refer to this period as the era of the righteous mafia. However, as Italy and Europe underwent social and wartime upheavals in the first half of the 20th century, the nature of the mafia changed, with its activities becoming increasingly corrupt and criminal. From an anti-French resistance organization, the mafia transformed into a criminal gang. Since then, the origins of the mafia have been forgotten, and they are now known only as secret organizations, specializing in violence, extortion, and extremely dangerous activities. Members of the Sicilian underworld call themselves Cosa Nostra, meaning our thing in Italian. The mafia often uses the term Cosa Nostra as a way to express pride in their faction. The Italian mafia grew and became so powerful that even IS was wary of them. However, a rather unique aspect is that many people on the island of Sicily do not view the mafia as dangerous criminals. On the contrary, in their eyes, members of the underworld are protectors who help the poor, especially when Italy was governed by a weak government. The influence of Cosa Nostra in Italian society stems from the special position of the island of Sicily, the homeland of these underworld gangs. This island is strategically located for easy access and plays an important role in the Mediterranean. This is both an advantage and a weakness for Sicily, making it frequently oppressed by pirates and invasions. The government was unable to protect Sicily from enemy harassment, so criminal families rose to power and took control of the island. Here, the law of the jungle was the only rule enforced, completely replacing the official laws issued by the state. Those who mastered this jungle law were called capos, and they used violence to strengthen their power. Over time, the core of the Italian mafia became intertwined with the brutality of violence and the coldness of money, becoming synonymous with militant organizations bearing the face of death. Despite their illegal activities and abuse of power, the mafia bosses ensured peace and stability for Sicily against the covetous eyes of foreign powers. It's no surprise that the capos were beloved and revered by the people as their own Robin Hoods. In fact, mafia bosses in Sicily sometimes became more famous and admired than movie stars. Messina Denaro, A mafia boss was also one of the most influential figures and the most wanted man in Italy. His loyal fans even created a fan page in his name and were ready to defend his reputation. The mafia didn't just act for the benefit of the poor, they also played a role in correcting the government's mistakes, though they didn't clearly explain what those mistakes were. This somewhat reflects the dissatisfaction of some of the populace and the government's helplessness in controlling the underworld forces. As is admitted, Cosa Nostra is the force that deters extremist Islamic groups from entering Italy's fertile lands. USA author Mario Puzo once remarked that the ultimate ambition of any mafia boss is to become the boss of a bank. Besides the need for money laundering, gangs want to enter the financial sector to secure their assets. The mafia became increasingly adept at political corruption, threatening and manipulating candidates, turning them into mafia pawns. Even the Catholic Church was involved with mafia families during this period. In the 20th century, the mafia grew stronger, expanding its criminal empire, and by the 1970s, it had become a major player in international drug trafficking. By the early 21st century, after hundreds of high-profile arrests over the decades, the Italian mafia seemed weakened, but the organization was not completely eradicated and still exists to this day. The name 'Ndrangheta, a notorious gang, sends shivers down the spine of the people of Calabria, Italy, every time it's mentioned. It's often assumed that 'Ndrangheta controls the underworld of southern Europe from kidnappings to drug trafficking in South USA, all under their manipulation. After years of criticism for its perceived inability to tackle the mafia problem, the Italian police and judiciary decided to launch a nationwide campaign against organized crime. Corruption and bribery in Italy have become so severe that Transparency International once rated Italy as one of the most corrupt countries in Europe. Corruption has caused at least 60 billion euros to be lost annually from Italy's budget, and investigations have uncovered many politicians linked to the mafia, manipulating construction contracts and even falsifying bidding results. However, the investigation also achieved significant successes, capturing several mafia fugitives, most notably the arrest of Rocco Morabito, dubbed the King of Cocaine, who was finally caught. Since the 1980s, Morabito controlled a drug trafficking network from Brazil to Italy. Interpol records indicate that between 1992 and 1993 alone, Morabito successfully transported 1,000 kilograms of drugs. In 1995, Morabito was sentenced in absentia to 28 years in prison, a sentence that was later increased to 30 years. However, it wasn't until 2017 that Morabito was captured by Uruguayan police while hiding at a luxury resort in Punta del Este. Before being extradited to Italy, Morabito was held in a prison in the capital Montevideo. Somehow, in 2019, Morabito escaped from the prison, and Italian authorities suspected collusion between Morabito and the prison guards, though the Uruguayan government firmly denied this. Nearly 2 years later, Italian police discovered traces of Morabito using a false name while hiding in the city of Juan Pessoa. Italian, Brazilian, and USA police then coordinated a raid and arrested Morabito. If the story of the arrest of mafia boss Marc Ferrin Claude Biart were written as a comedy, it would likely bring laughter worldwide. Marc Ferrin Claude Biart had long been a target of Italian police due to his connections with the underworld in the Netherlands, and evidence showed that Claude Biart was a key link in the drug distribution network from South USA to Northern Europe. However, Claude Biart managed to flee abroad before the law could catch him. Sometime later, Italian police unexpectedly discovered a cooking tutorial video on YouTube. Although the camera did not clearly show the chef's face, but it did clearly capture the tattoos on his hands. When Italian police cross-referenced the tattoos with their records, they identified the person in the video as Claude Biart. Using IP tracing techniques, they also discovered that the video was filmed in the Dominican Republic. Subsequently, Dominican police captured Claude Biart while he was filming another cooking tutorial to pass the time. Both Morabito and Biart were key members of 'Ndrangheta, and more importantly, they played significant roles in drug trafficking from South USA. The capture of these two figures provided the Italian police with the foundation to bring a series of other 'Ndrangheta leaders to trial: Tenerife, The capital of Spain's Canary Islands, besides being a paradise for diving enthusiasts, is also one of Europe's crime hotspots. The gangs used the tourist companies and hotels they owned to both launder money and generate additional income. Italian, Spanish, and Europol police coordinated to dismantle a 10 million euros money laundering operation in Tenerife. Among those arrested were many senior members of Ndrangheta. Their scheme involved deceiving people into transferring money to them, which was then converted into the cryptocurrency crystal and cycled through banks and hotels in Tenerife and other tourist destinations in the UK, Germany, Spain, and Ireland. After the arrests, senior investigative officer of the Italian police, Maurizio Vallone, stated that while there is less bloodshed on Italy's streets today, it does not mean the mafia has disappeared. Their goal is to become a part of the official economy. Mafia activities are not only targeting private businesses, they are also attempting to infiltrate state institutions. If not for the focus on terrorism and the alarming situation in Italy, according to data from the anti-terrorism unit of the Italian police, of the approximately 3,000 fighters from Europe in the ranks of the Islamic State, IS, 65 of them hold Italian citizenship or are of Italian origin. Though the number of Italians joining IS is relatively small, but the security threat to the country is significantly higher because Italy serves as a key transit point for foreign fighters. If you are a fan of mafia films, you definitely cannot miss The Godfather, which is considered one of the best movies in the gangster crime genre. In The Godfather, there is a famous quote that says, "In Sicily, women are more dangerous than shotguns." This line reflects a highly civilized principle of the Italian mafia. They would never betray their wives. If you can betray the one who trusts you most while lying beside them, you are not worthy of anyone's trust. Sounds great, right? But the reality is, nothing like what films portray. Many people go missing while others commit suicide by drinking acid. For women married to mafia members, their lives offer no escape, even if they are protected by the police. In the mafia, family is indeed the most important thing. But family here doesn't refer to wives or children. It refers to their mafia clan. The interests of the clan come first. So if someone poses a threat to the organization, whether it's a wife or a child, they are ready to eliminate them without hesitation. This is why women involved with the mafia often meet tragic fates. If they try to escape or expose the mafia's crimes, their fate is usually death. The structure of a typical mafia family is very tight, resembling that of an army, operating like a social network that includes everyone from the wealthiest and most powerful to those at the bottom of society. At the top is the boss, who is elected and is responsible for making key decisions, resolving conflicts, and maintaining order among the members. Next is the underboss, who is also elected and is tasked with resolving internal conflicts, and sometimes replaces the boss if the boss is old or at risk of being caught and imprisoned. Below the underboss are several Kappa regime, whose numbers can vary depending on the size and strength of the family. They act as lieutenants, leading their own sections within the family with territories that can be defined by geographic area or field of operation. At the lowest level in the organizational structure are the soldiers, who directly engage in criminal activities. In addition, the mafia employs associates. They are not official members of the family, but work with soldiers or capo regime in specific criminal activities. This is the real family that the Italian mafia uses everything to protect and dedicate themselves to. Maria Concetta Cacciola, a woman born and raised in a mafia family in Rosarno, one of the most notorious criminal gangs in Italy, was forced to drink acid to commit suicide. At the age of 16, Maria joined another mafia gang, and not long after her marriage, her husband was imprisoned. From then on, her life became suffocating, with little opportunity to go outside, and she often complained to a few friends about her oppressive life. She tried to claim basic freedoms, but unable to endure the oppression, Maria decided to report her family's illegal activities to the police. She was also placed under protection to avoid mafia retaliation, but the law could only protect her, not her 3 children. 3 months later, Maria ignored the advice of the police and her lawyer. She kept the report and stayed with her 3 children, but the mafia gang did not forgive her. Maria suffered unspeakable torment due to its horrific nature. 10 days later, this unfortunate woman was forced to end her life, sharing the same fate as Santa Tita Bucafusca, the wife of a notorious gangster, who also took her own life because she could no longer endure the pain. The Italian mafia is not only willing to sacrifice their children's happiness, but also ready to kill their own wives, showing no humanity at all. Meanwhile, what films have romanticized about Leah Garofalo, the wife of Ndrangheta mafia boss, is a different image. She dared to stand up and testify against her husband, but because she wanted to visit her daughter regularly, she refused police protection. Not long after the police discovered that Garofalo had died tragically in a warehouse in northern Milan, Garofalo's daughter knew that the murderer who killed her mother was none other than her mafia father. Although her mother dared to expose the crimes, but the girl still lived in fear that her father would return for revenge, as this is the true nature of the Italian mafia. Romanticizing the mafia and sweet love stories with a crime boss do not exist in reality. How do you feel about this story? Please leave your thoughts below for everyone to see. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to support my channel. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.